these tubing systems, minus the Pro 4040s and then their nano tubes, but all the other tubings, including the Pro Classic, are going to be a 2-tube setup, and one's going to be larger, one's going to be smaller. So first of all, the Froden will have 4 different sizes, and it can be really confusing. I don't know why it's set up this way, but it is, and this is part of the big problem with Froden, is just understanding what goes together. But the large tubing and the small tubing are paired. They go together. And the medium and the extra small are paired. They go together. So when you're buying the Froden tubing, that's the ratio. All right. If you want the bigger tubes, the fatter round tubes, you're going to go large and small. If you're wanting the skinny tubes, you're going to go extra small and medium. Okay, that's the ratio. The main tube, the tube that you'll be tying on for the most part, and the tube that will be in the front will be the smaller, and then the larger will be your junction tubing. And so how we do this is you cut a piece of the larger tubing. In this case, this is the large. I'm using the small and the large setup. I tend to like this a little better just because I like more rigidity in my tubes. The extra small is pretty flexible. This offers just a bit more rigidity, and so this is the size I tend to go with a little bit more, unless it's summer, I'm tying really skinny stuff, you know. I mean, I tie with it all, but in the wintertime, this is tends to be what I go with. So I'm going to take the larger tubing, in this case it's a large, and I've just lit a little well in the back, just like that, and I cool it down. This offers some resistance in the rear, and it toughens up the rear. And then I'll cut this at an angle, right? You can see that. So I'm going to slide that on first, and this is the F.I.T.S mandrel, the Froden mandrel, and this will fit all of them, so you don't need different mandrels. This one mandrel will do everything. And I'm going to slide the smaller tubing in, and in this case, this is going to be the small, right? So small and large. I'm going to wedge that up to where it doesn't spin. I'm going to put my larger tubing over it. I'm going to tie these together. You don't need glue. Glue, I don't even know if like the zaps and stuff will stick to this very well. But I'm just going to tie this together. And where I've cut that angle, it'll wedge itself closed, okay? And I'm using GSP. So just for example, and I don't tend to use GSP on the whole fly, just this part. The GSP will collapse this tube onto the mandrel when you're tying it really tight, and it will be hell to get it off the mandrel. So just the Vivus or anything like that doesn't tend to bite into the tubing as much, and so you have a lot easier time sliding it off. You can also put a little wax on here if you want to help slide it off. So we've done that. So now we've got our tube set up, and essentially what we've done is just made a 4040. All right, so you know, the Pro 4040s, they've kind of just done it for you with the molds that they're using. That's essentially all we've done, is just made a 4040. But you can see, like, I cannot pull this apart. It's not even budging. So there's no thread of that coming apart in the river, in casting, you know, anything like that. So that's how you put these together. Any of the classic tubing, whether it be Aqua, Froden, or Pro Classic, that is how you put all these together. Now, the reason we have this junction tubing and the small and the large and stuff like that is, depending on what fly you're tying, your hook will go into the junction tubing here. So if you've got our fly, you know, let's say, I don't know, whatever fly you want, but you can put the eye of the hook in the junction tubing, and the eye of the hook will stay there. If you're tying a fly where the materials extend past this quite a ways, when you tie your loop knot to thread your hook through, and you've got your loop knot here, the knot portion will stop right where the smaller tubing meets on the inside of there. And essentially, I guess you could get away with just the smaller tubing and a loop knot, but I really like how the longer tubing in the rear kind of helps my monofilament when I've got my loop knot track. And I'll give you some examples of this right now. All right, so we have our straight eye hook that we would use on maybe a tube leech or something like that. And that's just going to pop in, right? And that will be your hook holder. Now you can extend this if you're having problems with this sliding too much. You can extend this tubing back to where that's going to be a stop. You see, like that's a stop. But I don't tend to have many problems with the sliding around. That's part of the reason I put this well on here, is to help that. But so that's you know, this is essentially now junction tubing in its truest form, where we've got our fly tied and the hook is stabbed in there. Now for the loop knot style, I've tied a non-slip loop knot looped on a number 2 hook. We would run that through the rear. Pull it all the way through, and now my knot is stopped by this smaller tubing, and it can't slide back anymore, right? It's got a hard stop. And so my number 2 is trailing much further behind to extend to, like, maybe I've got materials that are way back here or something along those lines. So whereas this hook, you know, could be up in here in the junction tubing, and my materials are extending further. So this is how we get a hook further back. Essentially the same thing as a wire, you know, on a shanked intruder or something like that. That's essentially the effect we're going for, is to hang this back further. But that's basically the 2 ways to rig tubes, and it all depends on the style of fly that you're tying. There's not one I would say that's better than the other. They're just different depending on what fly style you are tying. I tend to like the fixed hook on my leeches, and I'll use the looped hook on intruders and stuff like that. So there you go. All right, so I've tied a leech here, black leech, and I've got a bunch of soft materials behind, or in the front here, that I'd like to stay open and current. The cool thing about the F.I.T.S and all the Froden stuff is their cones and their turbo cones are all, well, they have brass and tungsten. We stock the tungsten, and it is noticeably heavier than anything brass, which is really, really cool. And so anytime I want the effect of a turbo cone, but I want some added weight, which I will on this because this is an unweighted fly up until this point, the tungsten's really, really nice to have. The thing is, the hole in all of Froden's tubing only fits the extra small. So if you run the extra small and the medium, you won't have to do any of this, but if you run the small and the large, you will. But you don't need to buy different cones for different tubings. On the Froden, you just stretch it. So I'm going to pop this off, cut the front tube at an angle, wiggle it on. I might need to stretch it first. This is real stretchy, so I'm going to stretch this out a little bit. And this is actually how Michael designed this to work. Once you stretch it, you can pop it on. And you're just going to stretch the tubing until you get seated, just like that. See that? And you can still get it on and off the needle just fine. You just stretch this tubing and then cut it close. Give it a burn. And I throw it, I usually just kind of poke it on the lighter to mushroom it out. Something like that, just to really make sure that it's mushroomed around the tubing, and this puppy isn't going anywhere. That's a really, really nice tight fit. So on leeches, stuff like, you know, they've got some mini ostrich plume in here, some rabbit. The wing is rabbit with some fin raccoon over the top. You know, we got a lot of movement in this fly. and these turbo cones are sweet. So that's how you can run the small tubing with any of his fittings. You just cut it at an angle, stretch it on, and then pop it in. So yeah, really cool system. I've been using F.I.T.S for a very, very long time, and really enjoy it. It's really durable. It will not break no matter how cold it gets, which is a big benefit as well. So anyway, hope that helps you.